Rodrigo and Gaspar moved cautiously toward the sacristy. The silence was so dense that each step echoed like a hammer striking stone. The wooden door hung slightly ajar, as though a shadow itself beckoned them to enter. Rodrigo pushed it gently. Inside, the room lay empty, lit only by a candle guttering on its last breath. Upon the table, among chalices and folded vestments, a trail of dust revealed that something had been moved not long ago. Gaspar bent closer, studying the mark with unease. "Here," he whispered. "The floor." In the corner, behind a chest draped with faded altar cloths, a small iron ring was set into the stone. Gaspar pulled with all his strength, and slowly the slab yielded, revealing a black opening that breathed out damp, frigid air. "A passage," murmured Rodrigo, his voice trembling. "Beneath the church." From below came the stench of age, earth and mildew laced with a metallic tang that defied description. They lit an oil lamp and descended the narrow steps. The echo of their footsteps grew louder, as if someone walked beside them. The tunnel stretched into darkness, its walls lined with worn brick. From time to time, crosses carved into the stone appeared, whether wards of protection or forgotten warnings, it was impossible to know. After several minutes they reached a wider chamber. There, upon a rough-hewn stone table, rested what seemed to be a register. The pages were filled with names, dates, and symbols, identical to those they had seen in the confessional. Gaspar lifted it with trembling hands. This is a copy of the Vasquez sisters' book. But rewritten," his voice faltered. "There are recent names." Rodrigo leaned in to read. His heart froze. Among the entries of parishioners, his own name glared back at him, etched in dark letters. Before he could react, a metallic crash rang out behind them. The slab above had slammed shut, sealing them in the passage. In desperation, Gaspar raised the lamp. "We are not alone." And from the far corner of the chamber, a shadow stirred, slow, deliberate, its breathing steady, as though it had been waiting for them all along. Dawn in Tekali was ashen, as if the mist itself were trying to shield the living from what stirred beneath the foundations of San Bartolome. Don Esteban, hollow-eyed from his night of vigil, was startled by a sudden, urgent knock upon the sacristy door. It was Lucia, the young woman who had shared her suspicions with him the night before. In her arms she carried a small chest of dark wood, its surface veiled with the dust of countless years. "I found this in the parish library," she whispered, as though fearful the very walls might overhear her. "Someone tried to hide it. It was sealed behind a false wall." The chest creaked open. Inside lay brittle, yellowed parchments, bound with the seal of the bishopric of Puebla. They spoke of inquisitorial trials brought against clerics who, centuries earlier, had practiced forbidden rites. One name returned again and again, each repetition a blow to Esteban's heart: Bartolomé Vasquez. The surname rang in his mind like a cursed echo. Could it be that the sisters Vasquez were heirs of this corrupt bloodline? The documents told of coerced confessions, of false voices whispering from the confessional, of parishioners driven to despair and death after receiving what they believed to be spiritual counsel, but which was, in truth, a death sentence. Lucia's eyes widened as she fixed them upon him. "Father, what we are living through did not begin a few years ago. It is a cycle. It repeats. And I fear we are only the next names upon its list." A distant thunderclap rolled across the valley, though the heavens above were clear. And in that moment, Don Esteban understood, their enemy was not merely flesh and blood. Don Esteban and Lucia descended the stone passage that led into the ancient crypts. No one had ventured there in decades. The air was thick with dampness and the faint, bitter scent of extinguished wax. The priest carried a lantern, its trembling flame barely slicing through the shadows. "These are where the bodies of the first parish priests were kept," whispered Lucia, her voice trembling as though she feared she might wake the dead. The staircase seemed endless. When at last they reached the final step, a hollow resonance stirred in the walls, like a collective sigh. Don Esteban halted, clutching his rosary so tightly his knuckles whitened. At the center of the crypt lay a cracked marble slab. Faded letters carved into its surface still whispered a name: B. Vasquez, 1623. A chill crawled down Esteban's spine. The name was too deliberate to be coincidence. He dropped to his knees before the slab, and when his hand brushed against it, the stone gave a muted thud. "There is something beneath it," Lucia murmured. Together they heaved the slab aside. Beneath was not a corpse, but a chained black chest. The chains were rusted, yet the seal binding them remained whole, an inverted cross of the Inquisition, slashed through with strange, unfamiliar symbols. As the lock gave way, a breath of icy air burst forth, nearly snuffing out the lantern's flame. Inside lay manuscripts bound with leather cords, their pages filled with writing in dark, reddish ink that resembled dried blood. Don Esteban read aloud in a hushed tone. "The sacrament may be stolen if the voice becomes flesh within another's mouth. Thus the secret of the soul is taken and turned into a will for power." Lucia recoiled, her hand clutching at her chest. The sisters, they used the same practice. From above, at the top of the stairs, came the clang of metal. Someone else was descending. The lantern quivered in Esteban's hand as shifting shadows danced along the crypt walls. Steps echoed slowly downward, each footfall multiplying against the vaulted stone. Instinctively, Esteban extinguished the lantern, casting them into near-total darkness lit only by the pale glow leaking from the open slab. Lucia held her breath. "Who goes there?" demanded the priest, though the tremor in his throat betrayed him. From the shadows emerged a figure draped in a long cloak, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, eerily calm. "Do not fear. If I stood with them, you would already be dead." Lucia exchanged a sharp glance with Don Esteban. "Who are you speaking of?" The man stepped forward, lifting a silver medallion that hung around his neck. It bore the insignia of an ancient order, scarcely mentioned in colonial chronicles, the Guardians of Silence. "My name is Brother Alonso de Rivera," he said with a slight bow. "For years I have pursued this evil." The sisters Vasquez did not act alone. They inherited forbidden knowledge, roots that run deep into the centuries. Still wary, Esteban gestured toward the chained chest of manuscripts. "What do you know of this?" Brother Alonso leaned over, touching the parchments with reverent caution, as though handling a relic too dangerous to disturb. These texts were written by Beatriz Vasquez, a nun condemned for heresy in 1623. Before her death, she swore her bloodline would continue what she had begun, the use of confession as a weapon. Her descendants perfected it, until it came to Isabella and Magdalena. Lucia shuddered. Then what we endured in Tekali was no accident, but part of something far greater. The monk nodded. "And it is not over. In other towns, others practice the same art." The sisters were but one branch of a wider blasphemy. Suddenly, behind them, came a dry metallic rasp. The chain on the chest shifted of its own accord, as though unseen hands sought once more to seal it shut. The extinguished lantern flared back to life, burning not with flame, but with a reddish glow emanating from the manuscript itself. Brother Alonso rose to his full height, his voice heavy with urgency. "We have little time. If the seal is broken, then the others already know." A crimson glow seeped from the manuscript, filling the crypt with a suffocating heat. The letters on the first page began to writhe as if alive, reshaping themselves into new sentences, written in an archaic Spanish none of those present had ever seen. With a trembling voice, Lucia read aloud. "When the scribe's blood stains the altar, the paths of the false voice shall open. He who imitates the shepherd shall rule over the flock. But the time will come when 3 witnesses shall open the wound of faith, and the line of Beatriz will be broken, or endure forever." Don Esteban clenched his fists. 3 witnesses, us? Fray Alonso gave a grave nod. "It seems so. But do not be deceived, if we are here, then we too are marked. This prophecy is not a warning, it is an invitation for others to try and stop us." Suddenly, a pounding echoed from the stone slab above, as though someone struck it with a hammer. All 3 lifted their heads, paralyzed. "We are not alone," Lucia whispered. The monk drew a small iron crucifix from his sleeve. "Fear not. They cannot enter without leave, though they may try to drive us out." The pounding ceased. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the crackling of candles that lit themselves along the crypt walls. In their flames danced distorted faces, belonging to no human being. Don Esteban strode to the manuscript and shut it with a decisive snap. The visions vanished at once, and the candles went dark. Brother Alonso exhaled deeply. The seal still answers, but not for long. Should the book be opened again, what we saw will not be shadows, it will be reality. Lucia leaned toward him. What are we to do? Burn it? Alonso's face grew stern. If we burn it, we release what lies within. The only way is to seal it anew, with a sacrifice. An icy stillness hung in the crypt. Don Esteban fixed him with a piercing stare. What sacrifice? The monk lowered his eyes. Someone must give their voice to the manuscript. Once it was made to speak, it can never be silenced otherwise. Lucia gasped. You mean, one of us must fall silent? He did not answer, but his silence was more eloquent than words. Lucia recoiled, then shook her head fiercely. I will not accept such a fate. Not after what we have witnessed. If the prophecy speaks of 3 witnesses, then all 3 of us must keep our voices. Without a voice, we are no witnesses at all. Her words echoed through the crypt, as though the very stone gave assent. Don Esteban cast a suspicious glance at Alonso. Perhaps the prophecy has a flaw. You said it was an invitation, but what if it was written to ensnare us, not to save us? The monk pondered, stroking the manuscript's cover. Perhaps. Prophecies do not always speak truth. At times they are sown to instill fear, and by fear to rule the future. Lucia stepped forward. With a resolute motion, she tore free one of the loose pages that clung to the manuscript. The ink gleamed as if freshly spilled, and a faint cry echoed through the crypt stone. What have you done? Alonso cried. If the manuscript feeds on voices, she answered firmly, then perhaps it can be silenced by taking its own. We need not silence ourselves, we can silence it. The monk gazed at her in astonishment, as though hearing a truth he had never dared to fathom. Silence against silence, a perilous paradox. Suddenly Don Esteban noticed something upon the torn page. Between warped lines appeared a symbol no one had seen before, a circle divided into 3 equal parts, with an eye in each sector. Look at this, he said, showing them the page. This may be the true seal. 3 eyes, 3 witnesses. Brother Alonso paled. I have seen that sign in a forbidden codex from the monastery of Cholula. They claimed it was no mark of damnation, but of vigilance. 3 witnesses, who must not sacrifice themselves, but remain united. If this is true, then the manuscript lied, to divide us. Lucia crushed the page in her hand. Then we will not follow the prophecy. We will not be its victims. The silence that followed was filled with an uncanny calm. The crypt, which moments before had seemed to breathe hatred, now stilled and waiting, as though their decision had shifted the balance of power. But before they could rejoice, a deep echo resounded from the monastery above. The bells were ringing, wild, grotesque, as if guided by unseen hands. Brother Alonso lifted his gaze. The manuscript will not yield easily. We have defied its voice, and now it will seek another. That night, the silence of the monastery felt deeper than ever before. Candles flickered nervously, as if they sensed the tension seeping through every stone of the ancient building. Mateo and Lucia walked into the oldest corridors, guided by a whisper that seemed to drift from some hidden place. Yet with every step they drew closer not to revelation, but to a living, deliberate danger, the monks who guarded the manuscript. These monks were no ghosts, no phantoms of the night. They were men and women of flesh and blood, sworn in absolute loyalty to the parchment, bound by vows of secrecy and sealed in blood. They knew the curse, the warnings hidden between the lines, and their mission was to protect it at any cost. Any intruder, no matter how well-intentioned, became a threat. Mateo stiffened when he heard the faint creak behind a closed door. Lucia's eyes met his, understanding without words that they were being watched. They advanced cautiously until they reached an abandoned chapel, where the air reeked of old wax and damp stone. There, from the shadows, stepped the first monk, a man with a piercing gaze, his face half hidden beneath the low hood of a gray habit. "They do not belong here," he said in a controlled, steely voice. "The manuscript suffers no curious eyes." Lucia took a step forward, her voice firm though her body trembled. "We have come to steal nothing. We only seek to understand the power that guards this place." The monk looked at her with disdain, but before he could respond, another monk emerged from the side, and then a third. In seconds, Matteo and Lucia were surrounded. The chapel, once silent and seemingly safe, had become a trap. "The manuscript demands vigilance," one of them intoned. "Any knowledge that threatens its secret must be silenced." In that moment, Matteo understood, this conspiracy was no new thing. These guardians had labored for decades, infiltrating every corner of the monastery, silently shaping history. Their rituals, their prayers, even the way they arranged relics, all of it was meant to shield the manuscript from those who might misread its meaning. Lucia, watching their movements, noticed a pattern. Every gesture, every glance, carried purpose. Each word was double-edged. A chilling thought gripped her heart. If the monks could conspire with such precision, what else had they done? How many truths had they buried? "There's more here than you could ever imagine," said the monk who seemed to lead them. "And those who seek to alter the fate of the manuscript will pay for it." A shiver ran down Matteo's spine. They would need not only to survive, but to uncover the truth without being destroyed. For in this monastery, the boundary between loyalty and betrayal was sharper than any spell inscribed on parchment. And then, as the monks tightened their circle, Matteo and Lucia realized a terrible truth. The danger was not in the words of the manuscript, but in those who were willing to die for it. Matteo and Lucia stepped back slowly, but something in the eyes of one monk lit a spark of hope. He was younger than the others, his gray robes less worn, and his gaze carried doubt instead of fanaticism. His name was Ephraim, and unlike the rest, he seemed unwilling to follow blindly. "No, you must not harm them," he whispered, lips barely moving. "There are things in the manuscript even we do not understand." Lucia turned to him in surprise. "Why should we trust you?" she asked, her voice steady but edged with fear. Ephraim lowered his gaze, guilt heavy on his face, as if years of silence had corroded his soul. "Because I have seen what happens to those who stand in its way," he said. "I have carried secrets that have eaten me from within, and I can no longer be part of it. You have a chance. I can help you, but we must move quickly." With a discreet gesture, he pointed to a side door, half hidden behind a collapsed altar. Matteo and Lucia understood at once, it was their only escape. Ephraim guided them through dark corridors, avoiding hidden traps in the places where monks held their nightly rituals. "The scroll binds us with rules," Ephraim explained as they walked. "The guardians cannot break certain seals, but they can twist knowledge. I have seen them manipulate faith itself, steering the people's beliefs, shaping events while remaining unseen." Matteo frowned. "And why, then, would you help us?" he asked suspiciously. Ephraim stopped, his breath ragged in the shadows. "Because I am tired of living in lies. Because I have watched friends and brothers turn into monsters through their devotion to the scroll. And because, if you can decipher it, perhaps we can change something." Lucia studied him carefully. There was something honest in his eyes, a mixture of fear and resolve. There was no guarantee he would not betray them, but he was their only hope. At last they reached a small hidden chamber, where moonlight spilled faintly across a dusty, ancient table. There, Ephraim revealed a collection of secondary scrolls, maps, and notes that the guardians had gathered over decades. "All of this is yours now," he said solemnly. "But beware, every discovery has its price. The others know more than they reveal. Trust no one else." Matteo and Lucia exchanged a resolute glance. Time was running out, and every minute mattered if they hoped to expose the secrets of the manuscript before the guardians closed their circle. Ephraim, however, closed his eyes for a brief moment, breathing deeply, as though preparing his heart for the inevitable betrayal he knew was coming. For in this monastery, even allies could prove dangerous, and the manuscript demanded sacrifice. Matteo, Lucia, and Ephraim moved cautiously through the damp corridors of the monastery, carrying scrolls and records that preserved secrets forgotten for centuries. Each step was perilous. The echo of their footsteps alone could alert the keepers of the manuscript. "We must divide," Ephraim whispered. "I can distract some of them while you search for the seals guarding the central chamber. That is where the essence of the manuscript lies." Lucia frowned, her doubt plain upon her face. "And what if they discover you?" she asked, concern rising in her voice for the young monk they had only just met. Ephraim smiled, though the smile was shadowed with sorrow. "If they find me, they will know rebellion has begun, and that will grant us time. Besides, I have no other choice." With a swift nod, Matteo and Lucia agreed. They pressed forward into the corridor leading to the central hall, while Ephraim vanished into the shadows, leaving behind only the faintest echo of a whispered promise. "Trust me." The corridors widened until before them stood a massive oak door, covered with enigmatic symbols. Matteo unrolled one of the scrolls and compared the sigils with Ephraim's notes. His heart pounded violently. Each mark was both protection and a warning that intrusion would not be forgiven. "This is it," Matteo murmured. "If we break these seals, we may finally learn what the manuscript truly conceals." Lucia nodded, and together they began to trace the symbols carefully, following the instructions from the auxiliary scrolls. Meanwhile, in another corridor, Ephraim encountered the monk guards. Their voices rang with menace, echoing through the stone. "Halt! None are permitted to touch the manuscript." But Ephraim, quick and resolute, managed to distract them, drawing the guardians away in pursuit. Every heartbeat he won for them was precious. At last, the seals began to yield beneath Matteo's and Lucia's careful work. The oak door groaned with a deep, ancient creak, opening upon a circular chamber lit by age-worn candles. At its center, upon a stone pedestal, rested the manuscript, veiled in black cloth. From it emanated an oppressive, near-living aura, as though it watched their every movement. Lucia reached out, trembling, and when her fingers brushed the manuscript, a shiver coursed through her body. Matteo approached with a lantern, and together they felt the weight of the knowledge contained within those pages, truths that could alter history, expose betrayals and conspiracies, and challenge even the deepest convictions of humankind. This is more than we ever imagined," Matteo whispered. "The monastery, all they have done, it was for this." Moments later, Ephraim arrived, breathless, sweat beading upon his brow. His eyes reflected both relief and dread. "We have reached it, for now," he said. "But they will return. And when they do, there will be no place left to hide." The three of them knew that the coming night was only the beginning of a deeper struggle, a war of secrets, betrayals, and revelations that might destroy them, or make them keepers of knowledge no mortal was ever meant to hold. The manuscript remained silent, yet powerful, watching them as the monk's shadows crept slowly across the chamber. The doors closed behind them with a thunderous crash, like a warning. Matteo, Lucia, and Ephraim fell silent, the air around them thick with centuries of buried secrets. The candles flickered, their shadows writhing upon the stone walls as if alive. Lucia leaned over the manuscript, carefully lifting the black veil. Each page was marked with symbols and signs in a language both ancient and unervingly alive. Yet between the cryptic lines, familiar words emerged, names, places, and dates, threads entwined with recent events and the monastery's unsolved mysteries. This is not merely a book of spells or forgotten history," Lucia whispered. "It is a chronicle of what the monks have done, and what they still intend to do." Matteo's fingers trembled as he turned the pages, discovering diagrams of rituals, maps of hidden passages, and lists of names marked with sigils denoting control, submission, or betrayal. His pulse thundered. Each revelation unveiled the vastness of the conspiracy they had unwillingly inherited. "Look here," Matteo said, pointing. "These marks signify those the monks manipulated to fulfill the manuscript's purpose. Some are alive, others are not." Ephraim nodded gravely. "Every secret we uncover strengthens us," he said. "But it makes us more vulnerable as well. If the keepers return and find the manuscript in our hands, there will be nowhere to run." Suddenly, the chamber filled with a whisper, echoing as though it emanated from the manuscript itself. Knowledge has a price. Are you willing to pay it? Lucia recoiled, her eyes wide. You heard it too, she gasped. Matteo nodded, gaze fixed upon the pages. This is no echo. It is as though the book itself has awakened, he said. Each secret we unveil stirs it further. Ephraim closed his eyes, struggling to steady his fear. We must be cautious. We cannot consume it all at once, he whispered. If the manuscript senses greed, it may alter the rules. Lucia and Matteo exchanged a troubled glance. They had hoped for discovery, but what they faced was beyond imagination. Every word was laced with both power and peril. Full understanding might change not only their lives, but the fate of the entire monastery. As they debated what to read first, a sharp sound echoed beyond the door. The shadows of the monk guardians lengthened, their footsteps deliberate and silent. Urgency pressed upon them. They needed not only to comprehend the manuscript but to protect it before it was reclaimed by those who would wield it for domination and ruin. We must choose, Matteo said firmly. What we open first will decide our fate. Lucia drew a deep breath, realizing that this moment marked the beginning of an impossible choice, to unravel the darkest secrets of the monastery, or risk losing everything to the shadows closing in. The manuscript seemed to wait, patient and all-knowing, as though it understood that the true trial had only just begun. Night enveloped the monastery in an impenetrable shroud, and the tension in the chamber grew with every passing minute. Matteo, Lucia, and Ephraim exchanged wary glances, knowing that any decision could have irreversible consequences. The manuscript lay open on the stone table, emanating a faint glow, as if breathing. Lucia opened the first section they had decided to study, a record of events and names detailing the manipulations of the community across generations. Each entry was accompanied by symbols indicating whether the influence had been covert or direct, almost like a mathematical system of control. Matteo read quietly. Look at this, every act of betrayal, every broken secret, every planted lie, all meticulously documented. The monks weren't just guarding the manuscript, they used it as a weapon against their own people. A chill ran down Ephraim's spine. If this comes to light, Lucia whispered, the community will never trust us again. But as they debated, another section of the manuscript drew Lucia's attention. It contained instructions not only on secrets and manipulations but on rituals for impersonating others, their voices, their identities. The symbols and diagrams matched stories of mysterious past events, disappearances, and betrayals they had heard. This explains everything that happened to the old guards, Lucia murmured. It wasn't just about control, they could mimic others, assume their identities, manipulate confessions and decisions. Every shadow we saw, every divine act that seemed random, was planned. Matteo frowned. If this is true, even now someone could be watching us. Every word, every movement, could be recorded and analyzed by someone unseen. Ephraim looked at his companions, realizing the magnitude of the danger. We must preserve this knowledge, but wield it cautiously. If the Guardians discover we've deciphered the manuscript, they might try to destroy us, as they did with others before. Suddenly, a whisper swept through the room, louder and closer than before. The hour of revelation has begun. Those who know the secret must choose, preserve or destroy. The price will be high. The air thickened, and the three young people felt the manuscript pulse, as if it held a hidden heart responding to their thoughts. Every word they read awakened something deeper, a hidden consciousness that seemed to understand history and anticipate their choices. We must act, Lucia said resolutely. We cannot let all this remain in the hands of the Guardians. We must find out who is still alive and what their current plans are. Matteo nodded, his fingers trembling on the pages. Every secret we uncover brings us closer to the truth and the danger. But we cannot stop now. As the candle burned low, they realized they had crossed the threshold. The manuscript was not merely a record, it was witness, judge, and instrument of power, patiently waiting for them to decide how to use it. Outside, the monastery slept, unaware of the conspiracy brewing within its walls, while the guardian monks remained hidden, watching from the shadows. The choice was clear, but its cost was higher than they had imagined. At dawn, the monastery appeared unchanged, as if the previous night had been nothing more than a fevered dream. Yet beyond its walls, Matteo, Lucia, and Ephraim were no longer the same. Every glance, every gesture, was charged with silent tension. The manuscript had revealed too much, and they knew danger lurked in every shadow. Lucia whispered, scanning the empty corridors. "We cannot simply wait. We must determine which monks are still alive and who knows the manuscript's secrets." Ephraim nodded, recalling ancient tales. Some monks had survived for centuries through a strange covenant with the book, moving like ghosts, protecting the truth, punishing the curious. They decided to split up. Matteo and Lucia explored the upper library, where the oldest records might reveal names and current connections, while Ephraim investigated the crypts and underground passages, places the manuscript indicated as havens for the most secret of guardians. Silence was absolute, broken only by the echo of their steps on stone. Each door, each shelf seemed to hold secrets as ancient as the monastery itself. In the library, Matteo discovered a hidden compartment behind a fresco. Inside were letters, notes, and diary fragments. Every document recounted clandestine meetings, blood oath pacts, and meticulously planned schemes to preserve the manuscript's influence over the living. "Lucia, it's worse than we imagined," Matteo whispered. "These aren't ghosts, they're people, monks who have lived for generations, controlling everything from the shadows." Meanwhile, in the crypts, Ephraim found traces of recent life, symbols on the walls, remnants of candles, and a passage leading to a hidden chamber. Deeper within, he heard nearly human whispers, conversations about vigilance, manipulation, and loyalty to the manuscript. The monks didn't merely guard knowledge, they used it to control the living and maintain power. When the three regrouped, they shared their discoveries. The truth was clear: the guardians were not specters of the past but living conspirators, hidden among the community, ready to intervene if anyone tried to expose their secrets. "We must outsmart them," Lucia said, holding the open manuscript before them. "If they want to protect it, we must anticipate their moves, identify them, and control the information we reveal." Matteo nodded, aware of the risk. "Every step we take will be watched. One mistake could cost us our lives. But if we do nothing, the manuscript will continue ruling the community from the shadows." As sunlight began to stream through the windows, they understood they had begun a silent war. This was not merely about uncovering the truth, it was a direct confrontation with living guardians, manipulation, and the power of ancient knowledge. The monastery seemed peaceful, but inside, a conspiracy simmered, patiently waiting for a misstep, and Matteo, Lucia, and Ephraim knew that from this moment on, every decision would shape not only their fate but the future of the entire community. A heavy silence had fallen over the monastery. Matteo, Lucia, and Ephraim gathered in the manuscript room, whispering their plans as the flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows across the stone walls. Every word was measured, they knew that even the slightest noise could betray their presence. "We have to lure them out," Lucia said. "If we act blindly, we'll only lull them into vigilance. We need them to step out of the shadows." Ephraim frowned, scanning the empty corridors. "But if we provoke them directly, they might charge forward and trap us. We need something to force them into action, something they cannot ignore." Matteo opened the manuscript to the section on rituals and manipulations, searching for clues about how the guardians reacted to threats to their control. Her fingers trembled as she stopped at a passage detailing visible signs that compelled the living to intervene. "Here," she whispered. "If we make them believe someone has tampered with the manuscript, they'll come out to defend it. We could use that to our advantage." They decided to set a trap, a small, artificial fire at the end of the library, augmented with a trail of torn manuscript pages leading into an empty room. Everything was designed to attract the attention of the living guardians and force them to reveal themselves. As they waited in hiding, Lucia's heart pounded. Every creak of wood, every whisper of wind seemed magnified. Matteo held the candle, ready to expose any approaching shadow, while Ephraim stood vigilant at the secret exit, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. Then movement, A tall hooded figure appeared at the end of the corridor. Their steps were precise, deliberate, and their eyes glowed with an almost inhuman light. Behind them came another guardian, and then another. The trap had worked. Now, Lucia whispered, we watch. No rash actions. The living guardians scanned the area, their gestures and murmurs deliberate and practiced. Matteo mentally noted every detail, every sign of recognition between them, while Lucia realized that every action of the monks seemed pre-programmed, as if following internal instructions from the manuscript itself. Suddenly, one guardian approached the corridor where the pages were scattered. A shiver ran through the three young people. Any wrong move could give them away. Yet the opportunity was unique. They could observe the guardians, discern patterns and names, and finally develop a strategy to uncover the conspiracy from within. As night deepened, the trap yielded its first result. It was not a victory, but a decisive step. The guardians revealed their faces, and for the first time, the young trio gained reliable information about those who had manipulated the community for generations. This is only the beginning, Matteo said. But now we know who we are up against. And that gives us an advantage. Lucia nodded, clutching the manuscript tightly. Outside, the monastery remained cloaked in apparent calm, while inside, a silent war between the living and the guardians had just begun. Dawn filtered through the shattered stained glass, casting streaks of light that seemed to move across moss and dust-covered walls. Matteo, Lucia, and Ephraim stood together, vigilantly watching the manuscript, resting on the stone table like a sleeping beast ready to awaken at any moment. Lucia broke the silence first. We must find the names of the guardians who are still alive, she said, her voice resolute. If we can identify them, we may anticipate their movements. Ephraim nodded, though his gaze was lost in the symbols covering the next page. Diagrams were cryptic inscriptions intertwined with images of hooded figures and hands pointing to secret passages. We can trust no one else, he murmured. No one in the community. The remaining monks know how to hide and watch from every angle. Matteo traced his hand along the manuscript's worn edges. If the ancient guardians could manipulate voices, impersonate others, and control what others considered sacred, then everything we've seen could be a lie. Every shadow, every counsel, every unexpected appearance. Lucia cut him off, her voice a mix of fear and determination. We must act before they see us. Tonight. If we wait for them, we might lose our chance to learn even a single part of their plans. Ephraim closed his eyes for a moment and exhaled deeply. Then we must split up. Matteo, you and I will examine the oldest sections, the records of names and events. Lucia, you track any signs of recent activity, messages, changes in monk habits, anything that indicates someone is still active. Lucia nodded, a shiver running down her spine as she felt the manuscript vibrate almost in tune with them. Each symbol seemed to watch, each page aware that its purpose was about to be revealed. As they worked, a strange sound echoed from the monastery corridors, a metallic scrape, followed by a barely audible murmur. The three exchanged glances, and Matteo pointed to the door. We are not alone. Fear mingled with adrenaline, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Outside, the guardian monks remained hidden, unseen and vigilant, while inside, the manuscript beckoned them, offering both power and danger. If we fail, Lucia whispered, we won't just lose the truth, we'll lose everything we've tried to protect. A gust of wind swept through the monastery, lifting scattered manuscript pages, and for an instant, the shadows seemed to take human form, as if the ancient guardians were watching them from another time. Matteo, Lucia, and Ephraim realized this night would not only be a search for answers but a decisive move and a gain beyond their control. And as the first rays of sunlight gilded the broken stained glass, a new name appeared on the open page of the manuscript, as if someone had secretly written it. The Chosen has awakened. Watch every step he takes. The sun barely illuminated the monastery halls, yet the tension never eased. Matteo and Ephraim moved cautiously through the dusty corridors, while Lucia ascended toward the upper chambers, following the invisible thread of clues the manuscript seemed to have left for them. Each room told its own silent story, open books, rusted chalices, forgotten vestments. Yet among these relics, Small details stood out: a quill fallen across a table, a crumpled parchment where none should have been, the echo of footsteps fading too quickly. Ephron leaned over an ancient page of the manuscript, comparing the symbols. "Look at this," he whispered. "There are marks here we've never seen before. A code within a code, as if someone added hidden notations for those capable of deciphering them." Matteo examined the markings: thin, nearly imperceptible lines indicating directions within the monastery, faint names and dates corresponding to recent disappearances. "This isn't a historical record," Matteo murmured. "It's a surveillance map, and it points straight at us." Suddenly, Lucia appeared from a side door, holding a rolled scroll. "I found this in the secret library," she said, her voice trembling. "It's not part of the manuscript, but it seems like a plan. The design of the living guardians." The three of them gathered around the stone table and unfurled the scroll. It was filled with cryptic markings, symbols echoing those in the manuscript, and names that felt vaguely familiar. Each line seemed to indicate movements, rituals, surveillance, and potential targets. Ephron frowned. "Some of these names belong to people we thought were dead. They can't be alive, or at least, not as we remember them." Lucia traced a name with her finger, and a shiver ran across her skin. This is the last one we saw in the crypt 5 years ago. He was supposed to be gone forever." Matteo looked at his companions, the gravity of the situation sinking in. "They're not just alive, they're here, somewhere in the monastery, watching us. And they know we'll find them soon." A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the quiet crackle of the candle on the table. All three felt the invisible presence of the guardians and the certainty that any mistake could prove fatal. "We need to split up," Lucia finally said. "This time, there's no margin for error. Matteo, you and Ephron track movements and signs of surveillance. I'll continue deciphering the names and dates, trying to anticipate their plans." Ephron nodded, though his heart pounded in his chest. "If we fail, the manuscript remains their weapon. We cannot let them overpower us." Matteo placed his hand on the central page of the parchment, as if drawing strength from the words of those no longer with them. "Every secret we uncover brings us closer to them, and to danger. But we cannot stop now." As they parted ways, a cold wind swept through the monastery, stirring dust and dry leaves. For a brief moment, Matteo thought he heard a whisper behind him. They should not have awakened. The game had begun, and the line between hunter and prey blurred further. The living guardians were here, hidden in the shadows, and every step taken by the three young seekers brought them closer to the truth, and to the deadly peril that came with it. To be continued in the next issue.